Hi, and welcome to a new episode of the State of the Net podcast. I'm Paolo Valdemarin.
And I'm Ewan Semple.
And this is episode 20 of this podcast. Actually, it's the 22nd that we record, but we lost a couple along the way.
On the way. A couple of fatalities on the way.
And the thing is, we just spent, 20 minutes trying to sort out recording problems?
Yep.
And as you were saying, we're supposed to know how this stuff works.
No.
But I find interesting how this is not just about people recording podcasts. I mean, these days, everybody is on a video call or an audio call. And I keep saying all kind of problems. And sometimes I'm starting to get a bit annoyed, to be honest. I mean, when you have people with bad audio or, bad video, it doesn't take a lot to do a better job. But
so yes, with everybody using video, even, and it's one of the many ways in which I can become a grumpy old man quite quickly. But video is sort of overrated in the same way as face-to-face is overrated. People like video on conference calls because they think it's like face-to-face, but it's not. I mean, there was a fantastic video that we should share in the links of if meetings were carried on in real life the way they are on video conferencing systems, and it is truly hilarious. But it's things like, I was doing a video call this morning with somebody in Australia, and moving my window for the app and the windows within the app of the two different speakers up to the top of the screen and minimising them so that they're small, so that what I'm looking at when I'm trying to make eye contact with it is as close as I can get it to the camera at the top of the computer. Mm-hmm. But because people don't do that, and they always look a bit shifty because they're not quite looking at you. And then other things people don't realise is if they're trying to if they're being distracted by something else on the computer, you can see their eyes wandering, And frankly, if that's what they're doing, I'd rather not have the video. It's not helping. Yeah,
I use two screens, and of course the camera is on top of my Mac screen. And often when you use video screen sharing, I have the shared screen of the person on my other screen, so I can actually keep the faces near the camera. But the first then, if I'm watching what they're sharing, I'm kind of watching away.
Right.
It's I think it's a whole new etiquette to some.
I was going to say it's an etiquette, yeah. I mean, like this morning I said, look, I'm about to look away. Don't take it personally. I'm just looking for somebody's name.
It's probably that's right. It's a little bit like when you look at your watch, you have to tell them that you have received a notification and you're not tired of them.
That's right. Yeah, and that oil in the wheels is again fascinating with all these people currently experiencing it. And, I don't think they need all these emails that are going around, 10 top tips for whatever. But maybe they do. I don't know.
Anyway, times are changing. As a timestamp note for when somebody will listen to this in the future. Why would anyone want to do that?
Well, that's if anybody survives, Paolo.
Yesterday evening, the Prime Minister was moved to an intensive care unit. And I have finally received his letter this morning.
Right.
I think that I'll burn it. I think it's the only safe thing that you can do. But yeah, things are changing, and I think there are a lot of interesting things happening. Something that I posted on my blog a couple of days ago, but I think I only got 2 readers, so I can repeat it here.
I was one of them.
There's only one person I don't know.
Sorry, that didn't mean to be quite as harsh as it.
It's probably my wife. I heard this interesting podcast series called Planet Money, produced by NPR, and it's always very interesting, 20-minute episodes about stuff related to economy. And they were talking about a partnership that just happened between a small company in Seattle that makes ventilators called Ventec and General Motors. And it is very interesting because you could hear the CEO of this small company said, we get a call and this, the government told us to call you. We are your new partner. We're General Motors. And at first it was, what can General Motors do for somebody who makes ventilators? I mean, they're a car company, right? And what emerges is that General Motors is a car company, but mostly is this massive supply management marvel. They can find parts all over the planet very quickly. They have contacts everywhere. General Motors buys from thousands of manufacturers all around the planet. So with the help of General Motors, in a very, very short time, they were able to go from 200 ventilators a month produced to having parts enough to manufacture 200,000 ventilators. And then yesterday there was a post by Tim Cook saying how Apple is going to be providing 20 million masks that they have designed and that they are manufacturing through their supply chain. And I think it's interesting because if you look, I mean, at least General Motors, they do something. But in the case of Apple, Apple doesn't do anything. They don't have their own factory. Maybe they have a factory when they do Macs, but most of Apple products are actually manufactured by other people. What Apple has is the most amazing supply chain. I mean, there are moments when if you think that there are moments where they manufacture up to 1 million iPhones a day.
Yeah, incredible. And distribute.
Yeah, exactly. They make them, they package them, they ship them, and then you buy them and you order them one day for the other. So these huge companies have this amazing infrastructure in place that, of course, they can deploy on anything they want. So if you need masks, they can make masks. They can solve a lot of different problems. And yeah, I thought it was interesting. It's actually something that, I mean, I was aware of the supply chain, I was aware of the need, but I hadn't put the two things together. And it's fascinating how these huge companies can actually solve some of these problems.
Yeah, and it's not just the sort of equivalent of greenwashing. It's not just a PR exercise. I mean, they are delivering, really needed stuff. So it's interesting because we will probably perceive corporations and technology differently as we come out of this, and how we consume. Just talking to somebody earlier on today about the engine that makes us all stay busy is the desire to buy more stuff, but we've all got more stuff than we actually need. And being an optimist, that's one of the things I'm hoping people learn out of this enforced thinking harder and being stuck doing nothing much else but thinking, that we might consider why we do the things we do. But that then opens up the can of worms of how we regulate those industries and who regulates them, and the fact that they're global and they've got immense capacity but also immense power.
I think that one of the problems is that they also have immense cash reserve, which means that they can weather the storm much better than small companies and potentially much better than government.
Yeah.
So if there ever was a moment for a power grab of sorts, this is it. If you are a huge corporation with a huge amount of money, you have leverage.
Yeah. And one of the concerns at the moment is that those cash reserves allow them to survive when a lot of the smaller and middle-sized companies go under currently because there's not enough support for them.
Exactly.
And that grabbing thing, again, on a call today, somebody was saying that already some of the insanely wealthy folks around the world are buying up an area of land for them all to live in. It's like the worst nightmare gated village, the size of a country sort of thing. And that's apparently already happening, just in case things go completely tits up. I remember once having a lunch with a friend of mine, Vinay Gupta, a mutual friend of ours, Vinay Gupta, where Vinay almost literally reduced me to tears about a dystopian future that he was anticipating, and how at that time it was the lack of water and global warming that were the issues. And he was saying, the powerful and the wealthy will do what it takes. And the first groups of people in the first areas they will look at to have, a way of replenishing oxygen or whatever will be the forested areas of Africa and the Brazilian rainforest. And they will just not care about the people in those areas. And I was thinking, this is terrible, But then he talked about armed defence. And no, violence isn't a means to an end. And, he was saying, well, you're either on my side or you're not. And I thought, dear God, So, but this is a whole other world that we're just teetering on the brink of at the moment. And, one of the funny things was that the Queen, I thought, did a really good job. The Queen's good at what she does, and I thought her speech was fantastic. Well written, well delivered, timely. But it was at the request of the government and, happened to coincide with the announcement of Boris going into hospital. And it was almost like I wasn't worried till the Queen made a speech, But that signalled the fact that they're scared. They are clearly concerned about civil unrest possibly emerging out of some of this. And that, tightrope we're walking between our willingness to collectively... So I wrote a post that I called One Conversation at a Time, and it was off the back of that. And thinking, well, if it all falls apart, what is it that's falling apart? And actually, culture and society are us. And we build that one conversation at a time. And we can always do that. We've always done that. But we're sort of suckered into thinking that we don't have as much power as we do actually have. And so long as we're mindful of the kinds of conversations we have with each other and about each other, we could survive without ending up in some dystopian nightmare. But we'll need to try hard to do it,
I think that what is interesting about this crisis is that we are seeing on one side the potential of networking and people figuring out things and helping each other. On the other hand, you also see the need for something like the NHS, which is a highly structured, highly centralized thing. So, yes, we are the society, but we're not going to do me and you the NHS. We need experts and we need the structure.
No, but the NHS over the years has been centralized in its own. The hospitals have become enormous. My local hospital is closed down. Yes, in some respects that's because of the need to focus resources, but equally that becomes a point of failure. That's the weakness,
There is an interesting episode of Planet Money right after the one I mentioned about the cost of hospital beds, which is also very interesting. They explain why the number of hospital beds have been going down over the years and why this is good. But in Italy, for example, the public healthcare is managed at regional level. And in this crisis, it has been a colossal clusterfuck because it was not coordinated. Different regions have had different strategy. We don't even know what they are measuring. There is some regions where they test the people that have symptoms. There are other regions where they test everybody. So you can't even compare numbers. So it's I think that both situations have pros and cons. The fact that here they were able to say, okay, locally they decided that of the 2 hospitals that there are in this borough, that is dedicated to COVID-19, this one is not, so we're going to redirect resources from one to the other. You can do this kind of things if you are clever. It's not easy, but if you are able to manage this complex infrastructure, then you can actually have pretty good results. You can have a good impact. There are some merits in being a large organization. In the same way as we're saying what Apple is doing or what Amazon is doing with the infrastructure. This is stuff that they can do because they're huge and because they have figured out the complications of this whole system, and they have over the years refined them. We would not be able to build an iPhone just between ourselves, no matter how clever we are.
No, that's for sure. And in fact, another post I wrote, I called the best of all worlds, because the trick is going to be doing things on a large scale and centrally, doing the right things in the right way at the right time, for the right reasons, you might as well add. And I think part of what, again, is positive about this set of challenges is that we have so many more options available to us as to how to do things. And we've come through a period where everything was, the whole fetish was to get bigger, to soak up competitors, to become global, that the assumption was that was what worked. And the other assumption here in the UK was that privatisation worked, which again I think is being seriously questioned. And the prospect of coming out of this with a better understanding of what needs to be shared and delivered at a state, national, whatever level, and what's better not. Or at least just having better informed conversations about that, because it's all been sort of ideologically driven until now.
Well, I think that the truth is that, there will be a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I mean, to some degree, we now have some of the largest companies that were ever built, which are technology companies, and they're actually benefiting from this moment, strangely enough. Mm-hmm. And they seem to be very successful. They seem to work very well. On the other hand, we have small local level initiatives that are also working well and working better than the centralized government was able to provide. So
I think food's a good... Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm trying very hard, Paul, not to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I'm noticing it.
Have you noticed the awkward, the pregnant pauses?
I realize that I'm interrupting you more than you're interrupting me, so...
Yay, result. I win.
Well, let's count this at the end.
But I think, and we can keep that in, I think food's interesting in this respect, and some of the scary facts about how much of our food we import, always have imported. I mean, this was one of the challenges about the Second World War, that we just didn't have any grain or any rough grain locally. But I've banged on a lot about the fragility of the infrastructure around food and the just-in-time stuff. And it doesn't take much for that to fall over, as we saw with the toilet rolls, And I'm not saying we all produce our toilet rolls locally, but again, it's a fragility that we're building into the system.
But it's also true that I was at Waitrose this morning, and there were plenty of toilet rolls.
Oh, we recover. Yeah.
So the thing is that it was a glitch in the system, and not only I bought toilet roll, but I also bought artichokes from Italy, and plenty of other stuff that was clearly fresh.
Basic foodstuffs, yeah. But I mean, we still can't get flour. I can't get bread flour or yeast.
That is the interesting thing about flour is that I read an article that were saying the problem is not that we don't have flour. The problem is that the packaging of flour in 1 kilo packs is a tiny amount of the flour that gets produced. The vast majority of flour is produced is actually sent to industry or to large bread manufacturer.
Oh yeah, I think I saw that.
The amount of flour that actually people buy in supermarket is a small percentage. So the problem is that the flour industry is working at full speed, and then they are providing flour to the food industry. Yeah. But all these big mills, they're not even structured to make small packets for the supermarkets. So they struggle because they can't do that. On the other hand,
well, essentially, because I've tried making bread so many times over the years that I had, umpteen partially empty, well, not even partially empty, almost completely full packets of flour in the cupboard, which of course I threw out recently.
Now, this was something interesting at Waitrose. They had, I think, 10 kilos bags of pasta.
Wow.
Which I think
that should keep even you going.
They must have sourced somewhere, and if people really want pasta, they had. And plus, they had a couple of weird pasta brands that, they had a Pasta del Verde, which is an Italian brand that I had not seen even in Italy for a long time, but they had Pasta del Verde in a very strange shape, like lingue, which means tongues, which is not linguine, it was lingue. I have no idea what it was.
Interesting.
But it's coming. I guess the bottom line is that yes, the reason why we had a crisis was that a lot of people decided to buy a lot of stuff all at the same time. Apparently, something like £2.5 billion worth of food were bought in 10 days, like extra food.
That's going to test any supply chain, isn't it? Goodness me.
Exactly. It's basically, we had Christmas week without any preparation. And usually the food industry prepares for up to 4 months for Christmas. Mm-hmm. But if you think that a couple of weeks later we were back to normal actually, I would say that it's a pretty solid and resilient system.
It's interesting because, my normal concern about the food industry is when you take out the technology that allows them to do that. So if you're going to fight a war, don't worry building bombs, just pull the plug on their mainframes. But you're right, and it's also another example of where we will learn from this. There's that horrible thought that seems to be quite convincing that this is not the last time and that it's going to happen again. And even the COVID will have a number of resurgences, but that we'll face these sorts of challenges sometime again in the future. But the cleverness of business, and this is what I saw doing the lorry driving, the logistics industry, is just the smartness of it and the patterns that the data lets them see, and that they can make better informed judgments about what to do with it. These are all the upside of, we can bang on about the downside of technology all the time, but some of it's just incredible what it allows us to do.
Oh, I say that usually I'm quite in favor of technology, except USB microphones.
I mean, we as a people,
No, but I think that actually some of the challenges that we have faced in this recent, last few weeks, and the way we've been coping with them shows that, it's a pretty solid system after all, in the sense that, again, the food industry is a huge and amazingly complex supply chain, and it is working. It's chugging along quite nicely.
And not just that, but people's the glue that holds it all together, has been fascinating, and just people's willingness to help each other. And again, I wrote a post about this, that the kindness and generosity that mostly is being exhibited online, it's fragile, and if things got too perilous, we might start tooth and claw fighting for ours against others. But certainly in the short term, I think it's brought people together. And again, going back to technology that we've been talking about at the beginning, about using stuff to talk to each other, that old business that used to be, face to face is the best form of communication. I think a lot of people will be beginning to question that a bit. Do people having parties and having quizzes and games and all sorts using, Zoom or House Party or whatever? It's fantastic.
Oh, it's, I see at work, we are actually having a daily, 15 minutes call at the beginning of the day, where we all jump on a call and we have a quick chat on what's going on. Honestly, we were not having that when we were all working in the same office. We would just walk in the office, say hi, and sit there and just drink coffee and, check email. So it is changing, and it is showing other side. I think that probably what we should consider is that in many Western countries, governments have been providing a cushion and support. So one of the reasons why we're not freaking out is that mostly we're not afraid for our livelihood. Most of us. There are people with problems, but the fact that we are not in a situation where, say, we need to freeze the economy for a certain amount of time, now everybody's screwed. That would probably create a completely different environment. After all, I think that it's amazing how well we're all taking this. It's like, we're home. I'm lucky in the sense that I'm working and our company is actually doing exceptionally well, everything considered. But even if you're not, even if your company is shut down, there are furloughs. There is this amazing amount of money that is being created and used to basically support the economy and say, when we will come back, we will be ready to go.
Well, but also, if it's in a way, it touches on some of the things we've talked about in the podcast previously about what happens when automation starts to decimate the white-collar knowledge work population. This is almost a practice. And if this allows us to be more comfortable with ideas like universal basic income, it's fascinating seeing America talking about this. And wouldn't it be the ultimate irony if Trump presided over America becoming socialist with UBI? But that need to just provide a basic ability to live independent of work. If we get that sorted and do it properly now, then that will help us when other changes begin to affect us that change work.
So you're basically saying that all these us white-collar workers were working from home now, and we're claiming that, nothing changed, we can actually work from home, is that because we're irrelevant, it doesn't matter where we work.
well, you said it, Paolo. Well, but I think...
Because the important people are those who actually get... Yeah. So you're saying that this whole charade, we could just skip doing it and just get the money and stay home. Yeah, I'm up for that.
Well, but I think that it is going to be interesting, when the big companies start to go back and many of them will be thinking, hang on, why are we paying for these big, expensive city centre headquarters and all that floor space for all those people to sit and stare at the computers when, hey, we could get them to do it from their own homes and save all that money. And also what's it called? There's a book called Bullshit Jobs, that's right. The number of bullshit jobs that there are out there in the world. Again, these are the sorts of questions I'm sure people will begin to think a wee bit harder about from both sides of the coin, both the employed and the employers. But as I say, these are questions that I think we were going to have to face at some point anyway.
Well, the fact that the system is being shaken a little bit, stuff will change. I'm sure that there will be a number of things that we thought were indispensable, and we realized that, actually, you know what, we can live without that. On the other hand, as we have said many times, it's all a matter of stories. I mean, the whole idea that the government is creating the money to support the economy is a story, in the sense that we're not really, all they need to do is say that they will do it, and the whole economy calms down and everybody feels safer, and they will generate a certain amount of huge billions of trillions of debt, and it will be paid eventually, maybe, who knows. But in the meanwhile, everybody's sitting tight.
It's a bit like I was remembering the other day there, the first time I used Wi-Fi in my office in Digilab, and we got it quite early because of the nature of our job. And I was sitting there with a laptop downloading some software over Wi-Fi, and the progress bar's filling up, and it's giving me that perception that stuff is coming into my computer. And then I thought, well, nothing's kind of coming into my computer. There's some pulses, electronic pulses, that are being interpreted by the hardware of my computer to know which are zeros and which are ones. And off the back of that, I get the perception that stuff has ended up in my computer. Money's a bit like that, isn't it? As you say, it's just a story. And it's sort of, none of it's real. The days when we used to carry big lumps of gold around with us have long gone. Not all of it's a promissory note, and that promissory note is electronic.
Yeah.
And that's what fascinates me about countries going bankrupt, because all of that is a bumping up of their story against another story and a gap,
Well, I mean, companies or countries going bankrupt is when other people stop believing in their story.
So true.
That is all it really is. In a situation like this one, I mean, again, I highly recommend listening to Planet Money, because they have a number of episodes where they explain, for example, where do $2 trillion come out from, and how do you create that money and how does it work? And it's quite interesting, because it's a very sophisticated system, but it makes sense that it works, and it supports. It's a story that we all believe into, and that is why we're sitting here recording podcasts instead of running down the street yelling, "The revolution is coming! The revolution is coming!"
We're just muttering it quietly. But I mean, it is fascinating now that we have a global near instant distributed conversations, as the Clue Train called it. Now that we have this, the prospect, unlikely though it may appear at the moment, of everybody, all 7 billion of us, being able to go, you know what, this isn't working, begins to raise itself. Because the stories that put us at odds with each other where we're seeing a zero-sum game, and we're if I can't have it, you can't either kind of mentality is bonkers.
And on this note,
it feels not ridiculous to be talking about that. And this is a global pandemic. It's affecting every country in the world. Every country in the world is dealing with it to varying degrees of success. And we're all talking about that and seeing that and working out whether we like that or don't like that.
Well, I think that what we don't know yet, and we'll have to see how it turns out, is that while in Western countries governments are telling us a story of this immense amount of money, in other countries this is not happening, and the way they will be dealing with this might actually be catastrophic.
Yep.
So let's see how it goes. I mean, probably will.
But that again's another them and us story, isn't it? I mean, somebody was saying this the other day there, that we are risking crippling the economy of Western countries because we can't face the thought of a percentage of the people dying. And yet a significantly greater number of people die from malnutrition in Africa every day. But that's not a big enough story to make us all change our behaviours.
Oh, and all this is absolutely nothing compared to what global warming can cause, but we're not worried about that. But, you know, grandpa dying at the hospital, that is something everybody... Yeah, it's stories, and it's how these stories are framed, how people perceive them, how close they are to home.
I'm just thinking COVID might be awful, but it's a blessed relief from Brexit.
Exactly. It's, and, you know, so things are going to change, are they? We'll see.
Who knows? Watch this space. It's 42, by the way.
What the solution to...
The answer to life, universe and everything, yeah.
And on this note...
we'll leave you all to sort it out while we're away.
Goodbye, and we'll meet again.
See you.